Hello and welcome to Just Like Us's School Diversity Week. We are an LGBT plus educational charity who believe that the best way to understand our community is by hearing our stories. And this week is our School Diversity Week, which is all about championing LGBT plus representation in education. This is something that is more important now than ever for us to learn about the different communities we have around us. And last year we managed to reach 1 million students with our week. Before we begin, we have an important video for you to watch about staying safe during this week.
Hello, we hope you're enjoying loads of interesting activities for School Diversity Week. Millions of young people are a part of this and you must keep safe online. So as part of this, we are moderating and disabling public comments you might make on our social media so we can protect your identities. If you do want to communicate something to us, please just direct message us on our social media platforms, or you can email info@justlikeus.org so we make sure that we're still protecting your identity. Justlikeus.org/betteronline has more information about this and also has some information about where you can go for help or where someone else can go if they need help.
Okay, so introducing the speakers for our masterclass, we have Fox and Owl. They are behind My Genderation, which is a film project that celebrates trans lives and experiences and has by now produced over 100 films made authentically by trans people. The reason why they set this up was from a frustration that their experiences weren't being portrayed authentically in the media. And so they started to create films about the trans people around them. They also very bravely debated Piers Morgan on Good Morning Britain, and both identify as non-binary and use the pronouns they and them. So thank you very much, Fox and Owl, and I'll bring it to you guys now.
Hey everybody, thank you so much, Rory, for that lovely introduction. We appreciate that. We'll introduce ourselves quickly and then we're going to show you a video because I think that film is such an incredibly powerful medium. The proof is in what we produce rather than us talking at you. So my name's Fox Fisher. I'm a non-binary person. I co-founded the My Generation film project, as Rory was saying, out of frustration of what was around me and of trans and non-binary people not being portrayed really authentically in the media. So we thought we'd cut out the middlemen and start making films ourselves.
Yeah, and I'm Ugla. I usually go by the name Owl as well, and I am one of the co-directors of My Generation. I've been a part of it for about 4 years now, and yeah, we've produced a lot of films in the time. But I think it's best if we show you our intro video to begin with, and then we can get into the nitty-gritty things of how we create that.
For sure, yeah. So cue video, please.
We are valid. We are beautiful. There is nothing wrong with us. Quite the opposite. Everything is right with us.
Great stuff. So yeah, we just wanted to talk a little bit about filmmaking in general and why we started to create it and the process that we went through in order to get to this point. So there's lots to talk about, so I'm just going to dive right in. We're just going to cover various topics and we can answer some questions afterwards too. But the reason that I wanted to set up My Generation is that there just wasn't a huge amount of representation around me. And it was very therapeutic to be able to go and film with people around me and be able to tell their stories authentically. And it had this double whammy effect of being able to represent people back to themselves, which I think was really good for some people's confidence too, that they could they had something, especially if they're a bit shy. I'm thinking about, for example, Alice, who's an older trans poet, and I used to see her around, and I wanted to get to know her better, and so I made this film about her, and we had some of her poetry at the end as well. And I just love the fact that when we put it out there, that people would come up to Alice after that and say, "Hey, I saw your film. I think you're really cool," and just want to have a conversation with her. So I think that was really, really nice.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we always try to do with our films. We try to make people feel happy and more confident about themselves, because we know that trans people often have a lot of negativity around them, and there's a lot of negative stuff in the press. So we like to create something really positive, showing people doing what they love and just showing people as people.
It's really such a basic message. So yeah, I suppose you're watching this because maybe you're interested in getting into filmmaking. So for me, I didn't really have any huge amount of experience with filmmaking when I started. I just knew that I wanted to, which is why I was more interested in making documentary type films, because I think that documentary is quite a forgiving genre. So it's a great place to start. And of course, it's all about stories, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, it's really about telling a story. And there's so many creative ways in order to do that. You're only really limited with time. And of course, money does come into it. But I think that because most people have a smartphone these days, I think it is possible to create something on a very, very small budget. Or of course, if you're at school, you should be able to access some sort of equipment, cameras and lights and so on. So I just want to explain a little bit, just before we get into the equipment, I wanted to talk about utilizing what's around you. And I think that this is really important to remember, that don't wait until you've got this incredible set or whatever. I mean, obviously there's you can just shelve that project for now, but I mean, work with what you can do initially. So perhaps you've got a story that you want to tell, or maybe you know someone that has a really interesting story, and it's the case of going to see them and maybe and also utilizing locations around you. So maybe somebody works at a certain place that's got quite a cool background, or you can utilize a space in some way.
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised by how much you can use just of your own home environment. A lot of the films that we've created have just been in our house or just outside our house, so we've utilized a lot of this area, and we've filmed films in our own garden. We've done all sorts of things. So use what you have around you, because you'd be surprised by how easy it is to find spaces or find people in your local community, and find stories that you want to portray and tell.
Yeah, and often the bigger budget stuff, it just takes people a lot of time to plan, and then they have to pay for location fees and all that. And when you're just starting out as a filmmaker, you want to keep costs way down. So utilize what you can in the street and so on. And yeah, like you were saying, you might be surprised at what you can get away with, or how you can transform a space. So we'll talk a little bit about equipment as well. And so if you have access to a smartphone or just a phone that has a camera, that's a great start. And I don't want to teach you guys to suck eggs or anything, but we'll talk a little bit about setting that camera up as well. But just equipment wise, if we're going somewhere and we have very limited space, for example, if we're traveling, we will have a stripped down kit. I have to tell you now, the most important thing about filmmaking is audio. If you've got a decent audio, you can get away with all sorts of shaky camera angles and so on. If you've got good audio, then people are going to be engaged. So have a think about that as well when you're filmmaking. And for us, obviously you can use the microphone attached to your camera or your phone, but you might want to invest, if you do have the money for under, I think it's about 30-40 pounds, you can get yourself a separate mic that can actually plug into your smartphone. So we use one of those. It's a Rode one, and it's just like a little mic that you can get that you can stick onto your
onto your clothes. They call it a lavalier mic, and yeah, it just sort of trails up down your clothing, and you can stick it with a little thing to the clothing, and it's quite easy to hide. You just sort of stick it to your clothing, and then it picks up the audio quite well.
So that gives really really good results, and we definitely recommend that. So totally stripped down kit. You got a phone, you got one of these things, or just have your phone. That's absolutely fine. And then moving up for audio, for example, we've got one of these bad boys, which is a Zoom. It's an H5 Zoom, and this means that we've got separate audio. And if we want to be really technical about it as well, then actually we can attach it to one of these. Dun, dun, dun.
It's called a blimp.
It's called a blimp. So inside this thing, if you want to just undo that.
Yeah.
So this blimpy thing, inside that is a Rode mic, which is, we've gone up over the years, and we always usually buy secondhand equipment as well, so you can actually get a pretty good deal out there. But inside that we've got the, oh, sorry, is that the wrong way around? I'm just going to undo that, if you just want to twist that off. But this actually will attach to this, so you can actually record audio just by your Zoom, or you can attach the Zoom to this Rode mic. So inside there is, the reason this is so big is that it's got to house the audio mic, and you just, when you've got something so sensitive, you don't want to be getting your hands all over it, and you're going to have these weird echoey noises.
And this is on the typical boom poles that you sort of raise up, and you direct it towards the person that's speaking at any given time. So if I was recording Fox,
you'd angle it towards, hello, speaky,
Yeah.
you'd angle it towards me. So this directional kind of mic actually gives really great results, and it means that somebody doesn't actually have to have a lapel. Let's say the clothing doesn't allow for that. You don't want to have the mic so visible. One of these is really great.
Yeah,
We'd often recommend for people to do both though as well, because things can go wrong with audio. So it's good to have a backup. Maybe do this plus the directional Rode mic. This is getting really technical, though, guys.
Yeah, and this is more expensive stuff. So you're absolutely fine with a lavalier mic and without this one. But if you want to take it up another step and you have the money, then this is a really great investment.
For sure. We've actually kind of got to that point eventually, but we didn't start out like that. Camera-wise as well, at the moment we're using these lovely DSLR cameras, which use the old. You can also use the old lenses for it. I've got a Canon lens on this one right now, and it's a 50mm. Again, 50mm is kind of the standard for portrait settings. We often use a 30mm as well. That gives you a little bit more depth. And then if we're not using, this is quite heavy as well, if we're not using one of those, we might use this, which is kind of considered the vlogger's dream, which is the Canon G7X. And the beneficial thing about this camera is it's got a little flippy uppy screen, so you can actually look at yourself and make sure that you're framed while you're speaking or while you're filming. If you're filming just, for yourself.
And it gives you quite good results, and is not, it's one of the cheaper, decent cameras. So if you're looking to invest in a camera to do vlogging or to do some filming to start out with, this one is a great choice to do that.
Yeah, and they're onto the Mark 3 or 4 now, so you can get the older versions pretty cheaply. Again, we got the second hand, I think. So yeah, camera-wise, anything from a phone right up to the DSLRs. What we used to have with our cameras was we'd have a tripod, and again there's different variations of that. So I would say a monopod is actually an incredible way just to kind of have a little bit of balance on what you're doing. You can keep a steady hand and it's still movable. So with the monopod you can just screw your phone or your camera or whatever on this. I suppose the phone won't allow you for that, but the camera definitely has that attachment to it. And then it goes up all the way up to like a tripod. A Manfrotto tripod is like quality goods, it's nice and solid. So we've got a couple of these bad boys, but we also have, and this has been a real game changer for us, this is how we get those cinematic shots. We've got something called a gimbal.
Yeah.
And the gimbal is pretty cool because it balances the camera. It takes a little bit just to kind of organize the just to get it really properly balanced. Yeah, maybe Al's going to try that. But once you've got it in, it's just absolutely streamlined, really beautiful. And if you're not going to use a DSLR, there is actually a camera version of that which I'm sure you've seen before, which is it looks kind of similar. So you put your camera on there, and again, it gives you really smooth movement. So Again, these don't cost too much. There's probably about £40 maybe for this, and then you've got stability. So I think that's probably about as technical as I'm going to go, and there might be specific questions around that. I just wanted to talk one tiny bit about light. So we've used various lights in the past, and I think you might have seen the soft boxes that people use when they're vlogging and so on. But I've discovered these lights recently, which take a battery at the back, or you can plug them in, and they're just these nice LED lights. And the beauty of that is that you can go to places which you might not be able to plug stuff in, and you can move them around. You're not going to be tripping over wires and stuff. So with these rechargeable batteries, it's pretty handy. So we've got about 2 or 3 of these to light things, and that kind of gets me onto the next point, which is about dressing the set. So when you're filming, obviously it's really important to think about what's behind you. So if you think about us, we're like, oh, okay, we're doing a masterclass. Do we want to show my studio room? Maybe, but how about having a divider like that with a couple of trans flags? It just helps to kind of dress the set. So we thought about that before we filmed today.
And think about if you have too much of a distracting background, people are going to be distracted from what you actually want them to be looking at. So I think it's important to make sure it's intended, whatever is behind you.
Exactly, and you know, we're quite well lit. We don't have any lights in front of us right now, but we do have a natural light. So we're in front of a window. That's what's in front of us here, and the window is shut because noise is such an important thing. So that brings us on to the next part, which is just have a think in the space that you're using. What kind of audio is there? Is there a fridge that you can turn off? Is there a window that you can shut because there's traffic outside? It's really basic stuff, but you know, if you're taking the time to go and film, you just want to be able to just check those things, because that'll be the difference between good audio and not so good audio.
And another thing to do when you start filming is to make sure that your audio is working before you go, because there's nothing worse than having interviewed someone or done a great film and there was no audio. So if you lose the audio, you don't have anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really, really important to make sure that that's all on. It's the right level of, you know, volume, and everything is just in place. And yeah, just have a think about, just like stop for a second before you film and think about, is there anything I can hear in my environment that might be distracting?
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us on to the next part, which is editing. So one aspect of filmmaking obviously is the filming, and that might seem like you've done that fairly quickly. Maybe it'll take 20 minutes to film something, but when it comes to the edit, there's so much that you can do. You probably want to take a bit of time to edit your piece and then see stuff with fresh eyes. So when we edit something, we don't do it all in one day. We'll do a rough edit, we'll come back with fresh eyes, and it's amazing what you see when you have a little bit of space between editing. So I would definitely recommend that. If you don't want to be stuck there, like I was, so for example, recently I filmed something, there's a whole bunch of Q&As, and I did all the answers, and it took about over an hour to film. But since then, I've been spending a couple of days editing that down, all the ums and the ahs and the fluff. And what I should have done, what you can do to make your life so much easier, is you can write a script. So if if you're answering questions, for example, or you're covering a topic, writing an essay or writing all your words down in advance is really helpful, because then you can pretty much stick to the script. Obviously, you can move around a little bit. There's a bit of leeway. But it just means that you're going to get a lot more quality. You're going to get a lot of quality work out of that.
And it's going to be a lot more concise. And I think the same goes when you're interviewing someone for a documentary. Like, you can have a series of questions and a series of things you want people specifically to delve into. People tend to speak a lot, and sometimes people waffle on a bit, but you can sort of control what it is that you want from these conversations. And that's why it's important to keep in mind those questions. We generally don't send these questions out to people beforehand, because we want people to have their first natural reaction to the questions we ask them, but we already have in mind what it is we want to ask them. So it's worth, as you say, having a script, whether that's for someone or when you're filming yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, we've done both over the years, and it's been quite effective. Sometimes we've worked with someone when we know the film is a couple minutes long, you know, and you really want to pack in a punch, you know, pack in so much information in that time. That's when it's a good idea to be like, right, let's write a script. And if you've got, you know, maybe 2 different camera angles, or someone's doing something line by line, or even if you're jumping to cutaways, it's quite easy for someone to read from a script and for it to still seem quite natural as well. And that's another point I wanted to say as well. Utilize online. They've got a lot of free stock footage, so you don't have to necessarily pay for anything, but you can go to these sites and type in some keywords, and you can find some stuff that can make your film a lot prettier, and also it can help to mask any times that you want to kind of cut your edit.
Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to mention technically as well. One thing that we recently started using, which has really taken our filming to the next level, and that's getting a drone. Obviously, drones are really expensive, and that's more of a long-term goal for people who are being filmmakers. And you actually have to take a course to be able to legally fly it and to use for film and stuff, which is what I did for My Generation. And it's been really, really beneficial to learn how to fly a drone. And it gives you those aerial shots that you see in these cinematic films, and it just makes everything seem more professional instantly.
Yeah, I mean, it really was a game changer for us. We started using a drone about this time last year, and we were able to just get this godlike perspective where we had an intro, just showing, from really high up, and you can, it's really wonderful actually. And we were also able to do that for the Trans Pride March last year for the first time, and that just felt incredibly powerful to be able to get this slightly different view that you wouldn't normally have of an event.
Yeah, and it's just it just helps you change it up and do different things. But obviously there's cheaper drones you can get online as well that work fine. So just have a think about where you want to go with your filmmaking, and you don't have to have all the equipment instantly, like Fox said. Like, we've built our way up very slowly over the years.
That's right. And the final thing that I wanted to talk about was just about learning by doing. So often we're waiting for, when I've got a better camera, I'll start filmmaking, or when I've got a bit more money, I'll do it. But there's so much to be said for working with what's around you. And like I say, your schools might have equipment that you can borrow. And if you've got a good idea, or half an idea, I'm sure you can make something good. Because we started out, as I was saying, with documentary, but since then we've delved into all sorts of things, from music videos to short fictional films. We're currently writing a feature film about a true story about a road trip that a bunch of trans people took up to Scotland back in the day in the 70s, when they were in their 20s. So it's the sky's the limit really, and I think that if you do start with documentary filmmaking, again, that's just such a huge genre. You can perhaps do a spoken word piece that breaks up the overall film, or there's so many things that you can do.
Yeah, and I think when you get into filmmaking, when you start making films, you'll also see where your strengths lie and what's the sort of areas that you are best at. I mean, obviously I'd say that everybody should have skills at least in most of these areas, but there are areas in which we're just naturally better at, or that suit us better. So for example, Fox is more about the cinematic and about the filming, whereas I might be more about the production side and maybe thinking about the interview questions and setting the set and stuff like that. And whatever it is, obviously we both have a round of experiences, but it's good to think about what it is you want from filmmaking, because there's so many different routes and different roles and different things you can focus on in filmmaking. And if you want to be a writer to write scripts, that's also another way to go in the route of filmmaking. So there's endless possibilities about things you can do and things you can focus on.
And of course, during this COVID times, during social distancing, although we're slightly coming out of that now, we have been restricted. Normally, a lot of filmmakers would be out and about making stuff right now, but I think that right now is a great time to be really creative with stuff. So maybe thinking outside the box. We've been thinking more about doing animation, for example. So again, if you have a script or you can get the audio down, then you just have to get the images for that. So you can either get stock footage online, or you could perhaps do an animation. Really, the limit is your own creativity and your own time right now. So yeah, we could probably wax on about a whole bunch of stuff, but I guess we'll open up to questions so that we can answer really specific things. But yeah, passion for filmmaking is all you really need. And luckily, to reiterate, with technology these days, there's so much you can achieve on just a phone. I mean,
So don't be afraid to try things out and see where it takes you. It's never too early or anything to try, so you'll only learn by trying. So yeah, good luck.
sure.
Thank you very much, Fox and Owl. And it's really great that we're learning not just about gender identity through you both, but also about filmmaking, which a lot of people can have interest in. And I would say, to our audience, that all the extra time you have during lockdown is the perfect time to get started on filmmaking. Even if it's just making TikToks, that's still a
Yes.
start. So we'll go on to our first question, which is from Rimano.
Hey, Romano.
Hi. I just wanted to say that all that was really, really interesting, especially coming from someone who's wanting to start a channel myself. But my question is, how can LGBT plus people get more involved in filmmaking?
That's a really good question. Thank you.
Yeah, there are different schemes that different places and organizations sometimes offer for people who want to get involved. I know the BFI, for example, in particular has programs.
The British Film Institute.
Yeah, the British Film Institute has a lot of different programs. My Generation also takes on people sometimes to if they want to learn about filmmaking and stuff. And there's loads of organizations, I think. So I think it's about reaching out to those organizations or those places and just seeing what they're offering.
I think YouTube as well, like YouTube HQ offers some classes, and they probably are doing some online stuff at the moment now as well. So it might be worth just checking in with YouTube HQ and see, if you can get on something like that.
Yeah, and if you're a part of a youth group, for example, there might be other people who are interested in filmmaking. So you might, find a few friends who want to do it and start doing it yourself that way, and then figure it out from there.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, and I'm glad you raised that because something I've noticed is that there's a real increase in the amount of LGBT plus films out there at the moment, like recent ones such as Love, Simon, Call Me by Your Name, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, but also some showing intersectionalities like Moonlight about a Black experience and Disobedience about a Jewish experience, although I haven't seen as many about trans experiences, so hopefully we'll start seeing more of that also. The next question is from Rowan.
Hey, Rowan.
Hello. Thanks for doing the masterclass. It's been really, really interesting. The question I've got is, what is the importance of transgender people discussing their own authentic stories?
Brilliant. Good question. Thank you, Rowan.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a question that goes for any minority, really, and why it's so important to listen to their stories. And I think fundamentally for me, I think it's so important that we are telling our own stories because we are the ones living them and we're the ones experiencing them. So whenever there is someone who doesn't belong to the group and they want to tell the story, they're always coming from their own perspective and their own experiences.
Yeah.
So they can never truly understand or know what it's like. And that's why it's so fundamental for me whenever people are creating stories about different characters, different people, that they involve the people who are actually impacted and they're actually speaking about.
It just seems so basic, doesn't it? But
Yeah, it seems very basic, but it's just so important to keep repeating that, to tell people, you might have the best of intentions and you might think that you're doing this community a favor, but if you're not consulting them and if you're not letting them speak and elevating their voices, you're kind of just speaking over them and you're kind of, putting your own perspective on something that isn't necessarily your experience.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, the narrative can often be about hormones and surgery and so on, when there's actually so much more to a trans person's experience than that.
Yeah, and as this workshop is about today, we're here to talk about how to make films and not necessarily being trans, and that's because trans people are so much more than being trans. So I think the more people who can realize that and more people can elevate trans voices in regular settings and in other settings as well, that's gonna make trans people more visible in every area.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. Thanks, Rowan.
Thanks for that question and a great response also. We now have a question from Siraj.
Hey, Siraj.
Hi. My question is, you've made a huge amount of amazing content, but if you had to pick your favorite, what would that be?
Playing favorites now.
I know. Okay, I think that one of my favorites is a really simple film that we made that we almost never even released because we thought it was too basic. It's a conversation between a 12-year-old, or sorry, 11-year-old trans girl and a 70-year-old trans woman. And so they're almost 60 years apart, and it's just so simple because they're just talking about their experiences and what things were like growing up. And there's a real connection with the two. They are friends anyway, but
Yeah.
we were actually there just filming with the 11-year-old and that for a completely separate film series. And they said, "Oh, would you like to just meet this other older trans woman and film a conversation?" We were like, "Yeah, okay, sure, why not?" But actually, that film really touched people's hearts. And
Yeah.
although we don't have a huge amount of money to promote our films when we do them, we put this one out on YouTube, Facebook, and so on. And the one on Facebook, we didn't boost it, we didn't pay any money for it or anything, but naturally it had this like real, I don't know, it just got people's hearts, and
Yeah.
it's had over 2 million views now just by people
Yeah.
sharing it. So
Yeah.
that's powerful.
Yeah, and it's often the simple stuff that has the most impact. And we just kind of thought, oh, this is a bit simple, but we'll do it anyway. And then we kind of cut it together and like, oh, this is something. And then we just realized when we released it how powerful it was. And it was just because it was two people from completely different generations with very, different experiences, but they had such a beautiful connection because they were both trans. And I think that was really, really heartwarming and just showed the humanity of being trans.
Yeah, that's the key. And I think if I can have, because there's two of us, can we choose one
Yeah,
other as well?
go on each. Yeah.
I would say I really love the fiction. We made a short fiction called Get Off My Turf, and we filmed it probably this time last year. And it's about a trans person who lives next door to someone who
Yeah.
is a bit transphobic, and so they're neighbors, and they have this conversation over the back garden fence. And again, it's quite simple. It's quite a simple film that just takes
Yeah.
place in one location, but
Yeah.
again, it's powerful, I think.
Yeah, and it kind of shows that friendship overcomes all of these arguments or debates that are being had, and they don't really matter when people have a connection to someone. And I think that was the message of it, which I think is really needed right now.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so
Amazing,
much.
thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions. So I'd like to say a huge thanks to Fox and Owl for speaking to us. And I really think that hearing from both of you is so important because, in my opinion, in the UK, while we've had so much progress for, gay, lesbian, and bisexual rights and understanding, I do feel that when it comes to gender identity and transgender, even though that identity has existed for centuries, there's only really been a real public awakening recently, and there's still a lot more to do. And I think an amazing way of learning about people like you is through film. So I'll definitely be checking out your film site soon. So for everyone who's been watching, thank you for attending. We have much more to come from School Diversity Week, and the masterclass page is on this video and all the other information you can have. And again, a final thanks to Fox and Owl for a very eye-opening talk.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone.